Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, we follow a mother's heart as it breaks and then becomes steel. She finds her son James alone in a scorched field, bleeding and exhausted, punishing himself because he believes sacrifice will protect the ones he loves. She makes a choice that changes everything. She calls Diep. She brings little Nye to that field, and she declares that it's time to plan a wedding. This is a story about the courage it takes to defy the pain of the past and fight for the future your family deserves. Stay until the end, because this isn't just about reunion. It's about three people choosing love over suffering, together over apart. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us. Dawn barely breaks over the horizon, red dust swirling thick in the air. A mother runs like a gust of wind across the barren landscape, her bare feet pounding the scorching earth beneath her. Then suddenly, she freezes in her tracks. There stands James among the scorched cornfield, his shirt torn and ragged, arms and legs crisscrossed with bleeding scratches and fresh wounds. She screams, and that scream shatters into uncontrollable sobs that echo across the empty field. "Mom!" James turns around sharply, his eyes wide with shock for just a split second before recognition floods his face. She crashes into him with all her weight, arms wrapping around him so tight it's like she's afraid he'll disappear if she loosens her grip even slightly. Her tears soak through his faded, sun-bleached shirt as she holds him. "My child, how did you let yourself become like this?" Her voice trembles as she strokes his calloused hands, examining every cut, every scar. Each deep wound slices straight into her heart like a knife. "Come home with me right now. I can't bear seeing you suffer like this anymore." Without warning, she drops to her knees right there in the dirt, clutching his ankles desperately. Her tears fall freely onto his cracked, sun-damaged feet. James quickly bends down, gently lifting her back up to standing, his voice hoarse and rough from days under the brutal sun. "I'm okay, Mom." He tries to reassure her, but his words feel hollow even to himself. After what feels like an eternity, James finally sits down heavily on the dirt step leading to the small field shelter, wiping the sweat from his brow with a wrist covered in calluses and old scars. "I'm used to it now, Mom. Manual labor. It actually makes me feel strong." He tries to sound convincing, but the exhaustion in his voice betrays him. His mother stares at him intently, her eyes desperately trying to swallow every word, searching his face for the truth behind what he's saying. "Strong? Look at your torn hands and feet." Her voice cracks with emotion as she grabs his hand, her fingers trembling against his rough skin. She examines every cut, every blister, every sign of the hard labor he's been enduring alone out here. James gives her a sad, weary smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm still looking for the proof I need, Mom. Only when Dad finally takes responsibility for what he's done will I return home." His voice is firm despite the exhaustion radiating from every part of his body. The moment those words leave his lips, his mother bursts into fresh tears, her whole body shaking. "But Diep and little Nye are waiting for you. Nye cries for her daddy every single night." Her voice rises with desperation, pleading with him to understand what he's missing, what he's leaving behind. The instant the name Diep leaves her lips, James's eyes darken visibly, old pain flaring up like buried embers suddenly exposed to oxygen. He lowers his head slowly, and when he finally speaks, his voice is so soft that the wind nearly steals his words away completely. I love Diep. I love Nye more than anything in this world. He pauses, struggling with the weight of what he's about to say, but I can't let Dad keep hurting them. I won't let history repeat itself. His mother can't take it anymore. She pulls his head down to her chest, cradling him like she did when he was a small child. Her tears fall hot and heavy onto his dusty hair, mixing with the red earth that seems to cover everything out here. Do you still love your mother? She whispers through her tears, her voice breaking. James grips her hand so tight his knuckles turn white. More than anyone else in the world, Mom. His voice is fierce, passionate. Yet even as he says this, he still shakes his head slowly, unable to give her the answer she so desperately wants to hear. Hot wind sweeps through the cornfield again, carrying with it the acrid scent of scorched earth and dying crops. James finally looks up at his mother, and for the first time since she arrived, he lets the raw longing spill out unchecked. I want a happy family too, Mom. I miss those old family dinners so much, when everyone was laughing together. His voice cracks completely, eyes turning red with unshed tears. I miss Dad. I miss you. I miss that house and everything about it so much it drives me absolutely insane some days. His mother freezes in place, tears streaming down her weathered face as she watches her son break down in front of her. James suddenly drops to his knees in the dirt, wrapping his arms around her legs, like a child seeking comfort. But if I return home right now, Dad will just hurt Diep and Nye again. I know he will. He looks up at her with eyes that are both absolutely resolute and desperately pleading at the same time. I can't let that happen again, Mom. I can't. He takes a shaky breath before continuing. Keep my secret, please. Don't tell anyone. Not Dad, not anyone, that I'm back in Vietnam. I just need a little more time to find what I need. His mother nods frantically, choking on her own tears. I swear to you I will keep your secret. I promise on my life. She holds him for a long, long time after that, as if she's trying to pour every last ounce of her strength and love into him through this embrace. James whispers against her shoulder, his voice muffled but clear enough for her to hear. Go home, Mom. Talk to Dad if you can. Try to make him understand somehow. I'll return when everything is finally clear, when I have the proof I need to protect Diep and Nye properly. Mother and son stand together in that dead, dying field, embracing each other tightly under the brutal afternoon sun. They look like the last two living trees, somehow surviving in the middle of a catastrophic drought, holding each other up against the elements. The mother finally turns away, her frail silhouette slowly being swallowed by the endless rows of withered, dying corn. Each step she takes feels heavier than the last, as if the earth itself is trying to hold her back, begging her to stay with her son just a little longer. But this time, something is different. This time, she's not walking away in defeat. She's walking away with a plan burning fierce and bright in her heart. By the time she reaches the main road where her car is parked, her tears have dried and her jaw is set with pure determination. She pulls out her phone with trembling but purposeful hands and scrolls through her contacts until she finds the name she's looking for. Diep. She presses call. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times. Then Diep's cautious, hesitant voice comes through the speaker. Hello? Diep, sweetie. It's me. It's James's mother. Her voice cracks slightly with emotion, but she pushes forward with a strength she didn't know she still possessed. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I found James. He's here in Vietnam, and I know exactly where he is. There's a sharp gasp on the other end, then complete silence for several seconds. When Diep finally speaks, her voice is thick with tears she's trying desperately to hold back. You found him? He's really here? Where? He's working in a field not far from here, punishing himself, thinking he's somehow protecting you and I by staying away. The mother's voice grows stronger, more insistent. But I can't watch this anymore, Diep. I can't watch my son destroy himself. And I can't watch you and Nee suffer without him. This has to end today. What do you want me to do? Diep asks. And there's something new in her voice now. Hope, fragile and trembling, but definitely hope. Can you come right now? Can you bring Nye? I'll send you the location. It's time to bring James home, sweetheart. It's time to stop letting fear and pride tear this family apart. We'll be there in 30 minutes, Diep says immediately, her voice suddenly strong and clear. Send me the address. We're coming. The mother hangs up and immediately texts the location, then sits in her car for just a moment, gathering her courage. She's about to defy her son's explicit wishes. She's about to force a confrontation he's not ready for. But sometimes, she realizes, love means making the hard choices even when everyone else is too broken to make them themselves. She starts the car and drives back toward that desolate field, her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. Meanwhile, back in the field, James still sits with his back against the pile of dried corn stalks, eyes closed, lost in memories and pain. He doesn't hear the car approaching. He doesn't hear the doors opening and closing. He doesn't hear anything until a small, piercing voice cuts through the wind like a knife through butter. Daddy! His eyes snap open instantly. For a moment, he thinks he's hallucinating, that the sun and exhaustion have finally broken his mind completely. But then he sees her, little Nye, running toward him across the field as fast as her tiny legs can carry her hair flying behind her like a banner. Nye? His voice comes out strangled, disbelieving. He stumbles to his feet, just in time to catch her as she launches herself into his arms. Nye, how are you? What are you? Then he looks up and sees them. His mother standing at the edge of the field, tears streaming down her face. And beside her, Diep. Beautiful, heartbroken Diep, staring at him with eyes that hold 1,000 emotions all at once. Relief, anger, love, pain, hope. Mom, what did you do? James's voice is accusatory but weak. He's holding Nye so tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, and he knows he's already lost. He can't let go. He physically cannot make himself let go of his daughter. His mother walks toward him slowly, Diep following close behind. I did what had to be done, James. I found the courage you couldn't find. And now we're all going to stop running from each other. Diep reaches them, and for a long moment, she and James just stare at each other, while Nee clings to her father's neck, crying happy tears into his torn shirt. Then Diep speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. "You look terrible." James gives a broken laugh that turns into something like a sob. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Diep, for everything." "Stop apologizing and come here," Diep says. And suddenly she's in his arms too. And James is holding both of them, his daughter and the woman he loves. And he's crying openly now, all the walls he built crumbling to dust around him. His mother watches them for a moment, tears of relief streaming down her own face. Then she steps forward and wraps her arms around all three of them. For several long minutes, they just stand there in that dying field, 4 broken pieces of a family finally coming back together. When they finally pull apart, James's mother takes charge with surprising authority. "All right, that's enough tears for now. We have work to do. James, you're coming home with us right now. No arguments." "But Mom, Dad will... Your father will listen to me for once in his life," she interrupts firmly. "I've already sent him a message. He knows something has changed. And if he wants to keep his family, he's going to have to change too." She looks at Diep and James standing together, Nye still wrapped around her father like she'll never let go again. Besides, we have a wedding to plan. James and Diep both freeze, staring at her. "A wedding?" Diep breathes out. "Yes, a wedding. You two love each other. You have a beautiful daughter together. And the only thing that's been keeping you apart is pride and fear." The mother's voice is absolute steel now. "Well, I'm done with all of that. We're going to plan the most beautiful wedding this family has ever seen, and we're going to do it together. All of us." James looks at Diep, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "Diep, do you want this?" Diep takes his hand, squeezing tight. "I've wanted nothing else since the day Nee was born, James. I've wanted us to be a real family. I just didn't think it was possible anymore." "It's possible," the mother insists. "It's more than possible. It's happening. Now come on, all of you. Let's get out of this dreadful field and go somewhere we can actually talk properly." They pile into the car and end up at a small, quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, settling into a corner booth where they can talk without being overheard. The mother orders tea for everyone, then pulls out a small notebook from her purse. "All right, let's start with the basics. When do you two want to get married?" James and Diep exchange glances, still looking slightly shell-shocked. Diep speaks first. "I want something small and intimate, not a big show. Just family and close friends." James nods immediately. "I agree. I just want to marry you, officially, finally." Nee suddenly pipes up from James's lap. "I want flowers. Lots of flowers." Everyone laughs. "She wants to be the flower girl," Diep translates with a smile. "The most beautiful flower girl in the world," James murmurs, hugging his daughter tighter. They spend the next hour talking and planning. The mother takes notes while James and Diep discuss venues, timing, and all the details that make a wedding special. But more importantly, they talk about the future, about James coming home, about becoming the family they've always been meant to be.